Big, big welcome to everyone for our third quarterly humanitarian briefing. I am Hillary Baggett. I am one of the members of 7730, our Global Partners in Peace. And this is starting our third year as a very new toddler Rotary Club. And we know that we tackle big issues when we want to talk about current world events, with our hearts all being geared towards world peace. And we know that Rotary is an international non-governmental organization with clubs worldwide, as we get to see today. And we're dedicated to community service. And as an operating rule, Rotary does not discuss politics. However, we have experienced, certainly in today's climate, that Rotary International is a political actor, and given the observer status at the United Nations and other influential roles in the political sector. Global Partners in Peace is our Rotary Club introducing this quarterly humanitarian briefing to bring new voices and perspectives to Rotary and to shine light on critical issues from our international perspectives, members' perspectives. So our participants are all invited to speak with authenticity while considering that our Global Partner in Peace goal is not to polarize anyone or further divide anyone on issues, but rather to educate and invite others into more discussions. Okay. And I would love to ask our immediate past district governor, Alan, who is here, to just kind of introduce, to open things up, and we will move forward. Alan, thanks so much for being here.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Hello, everyone. And probably Hillary won't be perfect. I'll repeat a couple of things you said as well, because I think it's important. But welcome to the quarterly humanitarian briefing from the Rotary Club of Global Partners in Peace. And today's presentation is Creating Champions of Peace. My name's Alan Quigley. As Hillary said, I'm immediate past district governor for Rotary International District 7730. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, we actually are 50 clubs that reside in southeastern North Carolina. That's our official residence, if you will, in the United States. However, we do have 5 virtual clubs whose members come from all over the globe. And the Global Partners in Peace, the folks responsible for this series of briefings, is one such club. And as Hillary said, today is the third in a series that they've created to help all of us become a little more educated about humanitarian crises that exist in many corners of the world. And what makes these briefings even more impactful is that, as you'll learn today, there are crises which members of this Rotary Club and associates of theirs actually are personally involved. Our first briefing was focused on the healthcare crisis in Gaza, as an example, if you missed that. And the second was about the displacement of Ukrainian citizens and the impact on the future of that country. 2 pretty powerful briefings, and today will be the same. They contain a firsthand account from people in the middle, as I said, folks who are living it every day. So it really does present a unique experience for all of us to learn the real story and become more informed about what's happening outside of the bubble in which many of us live. I can't thank these club members enough for the work they do every day in their communities. They are really shining examples of the Rotary motto of service above self. So I want to thank them very, very much. But at this point, I'd like to introduce, I think I introduced Sophia, or Hillary, send it back to you. Sophia is president of the club, and I know she's going to talk some more about the club. And Hillary is obviously running this and also their foundation chair. So I'll turn it over to you folks and look forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. And yes, I will kind of pass the mic virtually over to our current club president, Sophia. And Sophia was really kind of gave birth to this idea and concept. And it was through bravery and courage to say, hey, there's some issues in Gaza. Could we have a briefing to talk about it? And one of our club members, Mo, was kind enough to come in as one of our speakers to share his personal family story. And then in our second briefing in Ukraine, Sakun, one of our members, is physically located in Ukraine. And when we bring in and hear these stories, that's what helps us understand that while we feel like we can be far apart, we are actually connected and united as we are wanting to understand more about ways to drive peace. So, Sophia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I don't want to thank you and welcome everyone to this briefing. If you've been here before, welcome back. Thank you for making this event successful. And Hillary and Alan have been incredibly articulate in sharing the purpose of these sessions and how they were created. One thing that I would like to add is that when we created our club, we had people from all over the world, and friends of our members were presenting on issues like what was happening in Burma, what was happening in, well, as you mentioned, Ukraine. And they were such rich and interesting conversations, not about the past, not about what happened 20, 30, 60 years ago, but what was happening today and how little attention it got, or how not even little, maybe if they got attention, because a lot of the issues that we talk about don't get any attention. It was very briefly and very superficial, right? And when we have our meetings, our members like Sajad, who's in the room, would explain what's happening in Bangladesh and give us like a 5-minute history class of why are we here today. And we can't understand our present if we don't understand our past, but we also need to understand our present to care about our past. So we were having this incredible conversations at our club, having this incredible guest speakers, as Alan mentioned, from all over the world. And we said, we want these conversations to be available for the rest of the members of our district and our Rotary family. And we would be, I think the word is remiss if we didn't share this space with all our clubs and try to enrich their conversations as much as we enrich ourselves within our club. So instead of they say when you're not invited to the table, bring your own chair. Well, what we did is expanded the table and put more chairs around it, right? And that's why we're having this humanitarian briefings, because we truly believe that it's educating others that we make change. And oftentimes we feel very impotent, we feel very stuck, that we can't really do anything about some of the things that we're hearing. But we wanted to share with you our vision of hope, that educating and influencing people to think about these issues and think how they are involved in what is happening and how we can change it. And hearing from our friends, Marian today and Patrick, who are part of our club, and what they're doing, and how can you be part of that and educating yourself and educating others. It's huge. So that's why we created those. And if you wanted to know more about our club, we'll be happy to share more, but this is a group of peace fellows, peace practitioners, and others that are doing the work every day, that meet bi-weekly, and we'll be happy to host you at one of our meetings if you're interested. I see, Sakun, you raised your hand. Do you want to say something?
No, sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, okay, great. Well, I'll pass it back to you, Hillary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you, Alan, for kind of grounding us in our values. And Linda Lowe, who is our past president, and Chen, also past president, we are both here, and we're so grateful for you all. And when we're grounded in values of respect and listening, and I'll just be a little vulnerable before I introduce Patrick and Marian in the presentation today. When Patrick and I first met, and I started going through the questions in preparation for today, and he told me about the situation in Uganda, I needed a minute because I kind of was in my own American bubble, and I was so grateful that he was able to explain it. So whether or not you feel or express emotion today, no judgment. And with that, I will introduce Patrick Wire today. And Patrick is actually, did he just leave the meeting? I'm sure he will be back because he's very good about coming back. I think I don't see him. And if I need to, I will share the presentation. And Sophia, if you can have the map ready to share so we can give the continent of Africa, a little bit of context with the countries. And the way the continent is arranged is that, people talk about Africa and sometimes don't realize the vast physical size of it. And then it's made up certainly of many countries, which we can understand. And then it's made up of districts, more in America like a county, I think I would say, and then broken down into the smaller villages. So thank you, Sophia. And if you'll notice on the screen today, thank you. Oh, that's beautiful, Sophia. So we are now kind of looking at Central and, well, now all of Africa. Beautiful. And we're going to be zooming in a bit to get into Uganda to see Kampala. And today, that is where Patrick and Marion are physically working, even though they are not originally from there. Their villages are further out. And Kampala is contained, and it has Kenya to one side. And I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I thought Democratic Republic of Congo is there. I was trying to study up in advance just so I could orient us, but now you can kind of see where in Africa we are going to be kind of talking. Patrick has the wonderful influence of being able to impact positively through all of this peace work in Central and Eastern Africa. Okay, has Patrick come back to join us yet?
Yes, I see he's here.
Wonderful.
Very,
Okay.
you can share with our guests that all those little blue dots are countries, like all the countries that Patrick is working with. So that's the scope of the influence that they do. Sorry.
Absolutely. And depending on how you view your screen, on the right side, if you're in gallery view, then you will see all of us just kind of stacked on top of each other to your right. You will have the freedom at any time to click on, there's a slider there, and you can make the screen larger or smaller as you need. So if we are all just one column to your right, then that is all you can see. If you're on a mobile device, certainly you will have to swipe one direction to see the gallery view. And if you pin the speaker, who is about to be Patrick Wire, then you will get to see Patrick and his screen the biggest, so that you won't perhaps be distracted by all of us on the gallery to the right. Okay. Sophia, thank you so much for this and for marking, so we really have a physical picture of Central and Eastern Africa. And with that, Patrick, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, Hillary, you're on mute by accident.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As Patrick comes on, I will ask everyone to go off video just to save bandwidth. He is coming to us today from Uganda. And while we are so grateful for technology to connect us, there is a limit to bandwidth, as we all know, for our personal selves. So we're so glad that you're here, but if you could please turn off video during the presentation. Thank you so much.
Can I go on? Yeah, thank you very much, Hillary, and it's a pleasure seeing you all. I'm called Patrick Wire. I work in Uganda with an organization called Center for Conflict Resolution. I'm mainly passionate about conflict transformation and peace building. I come from a rural district called Namaingo in a village called Buboko. I'm always referred to as one of the victims of violent conflict because of my past. Someone has written about me a story referring me as a peace champion, and that is how these days I'm commonly known in Uganda. But he also reminds me how I started putting on my first shoes when I was 14 years, and specifically those being slippers. But I'll not go into those details for now. Today, I'm going to share about what we are doing in terms of transforming the lives of people from being champions of violence to champions of peace. Let me try to see if I can share my screen. Just to show that radicalization and violent extremism remains one of the key issues in Eastern and Central Africa, but also not only in Eastern and Central Africa. This is indeed a global issue. So we have a state of peace, which is the preferred, but we don't have it at the moment because of the radical behaviors and which leads to violent extremism. When we talk of violent extremism, many people want to associate it with the terrorism, because indeed it's one of the acts of violent extremism. So we see in Eastern and Central Africa that youth and children are one of the victim, the most vulnerable victims when it comes to radicalization and violent extremism. Why? Because they are easy targets for wrongdoers, for rebel groups to recruit such. So many of them are recruited and manipulated into acts of radicalization and violent extremism. Then they are indoctrinated to believe in ideologies that are negative, and this one leads to violent extremism. We see now they are usually misled, one under the pretext of employment and scholarships. For example, when they look at the vulnerabilities in the community, they reach out to parents, convincing them that they are taking their children and youth for employment or scholarships, but then they end up being indoctrinated and ending up in rebel activities and terrorist activities. Others are indoctrinated along extremism and religious and ethnic political ideologies to believe that the negative acts are okay. So it remains one of the threats in Africa, and it's worsening at the moment. And it's taking a lot of many lives and of innocent people and forcing a lot of displacement. For example, in Uganda, we have now 1.6 million refugees just because of the acts of radicalization and violent extremism. So this issue is also not in Uganda, but the whole region, and indeed as the whole world, as I said. Now, how are these youth, children, and other people turned into champions of violence? One, there are those who are formerly abducted, especially by rebels. Then they become child soldiers. And then, of course, as child soldiers, they are forced to commit a lot of atrocities against their will. And some in other places involved in what we call armed cattle rustling. Armed cattle rustling is happening between communities, for example, in Uganda, but also between communities in Uganda and those across the border. For example, South Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, and other countries around. So many of the youth who have been used and manipulated continue to face a number of complexities, especially around trauma. For example, we've had in Uganda over 20-year war in northern Uganda between a rebel group called the Lord's Resistance Army and the government of Uganda. So many children were abducted. They were forced to kill. They became child soldiers, and they experienced a lot of traumatic events. Now, upon abduction, many children were born in captivity. Many girls were used as sex slaves. So we have child mothers at the moment, but who have no cultural identity, because in our African context, cultural identity is very important because you have to be attached to something you can call home. But we're also seeing a number of incidences of rejection. For example, if a child was born in captivity, if a child was abducted, some are rejected by their own parents because they feel they are no longer like children of who are disciplined enough to be able to, or who are able to fit in society. And this one causes a lot of stigma and secondary traumatization. because while they feel now they have had a chance to be rescued, coming back to their communities, they are rejected even by their communities and parents. And then we have other incidences in districts like Kasese district, which is in southwestern Uganda, where a number of youth have been manipulated to become royal guards. Royal guards, these are like youth who defend the king under the cultural institution. And through such manipulations, in 2016, we saw clashes between the royal guards, those ones who had been indoctrinated to the extent of picking up machetes or pangas to go and attack military installations, because it takes someone who is indoctrinated really to be able to approach and start fighting with the person with a gun. And this is an area which is also vulnerable to attacks from rebel groups who have hideouts in other neighboring countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo. Last year, we saw around 41 children killed at the border area because these rebel groups came and attacked the school in Kasese, killed 41 children, burnt the school down, and ran back to DRC. Of course, when we look at the police remarks, one of the police remarks was saying, yes, we put many of them out of action, meaning those who attacked. But then what comes to my mind is yes, whom do you put out of action? These were really children. Many of them were really children around 15, 12, and 13. Because they were manipulated to cause such havoc. So it's like children attacking children and you're killing children, even if you look at them as the perpetrators. And on my side, I have to note that some of these attackers were really children who were called survivors, were from my home district called Namaingo district. And we continue to see similar cases and incidences around the region in countries like Somalia, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Sudan, among others. These are mainly influenced by both internal and external interests and also linked to colonial legacies. For example, what we are seeing now are fights along ethnic lines in South Sudan, for example, between the Dinka and the Nuer ethnic groups. What we are seeing in Somalia now with the Al-Shabaab terrorist group, the resource conflicts we are seeing in the Democratic Republic of Congo makes the situation more complex. And at the moment, we continue to see a number of post-conflict challenges. One is just the challenge of undoing indoctrination. It takes time because these are children who have taken long being indoctrinated, being fed with negative ideas and ideologies. So undoing that takes time. In fact, it's a long process. In one of the testimonies from the northern Uganda, one of the children who was rescued said, at a time when I was supposed to learn, what I was told was how to kill. In fact, they would be asked to kill, say, their parents upon abduction, kill their fellow friends, kill whoever is around just to give them that kind of indoctrination. We also continue to see a challenge of what we call the victim-perpetrator scenario. And this one is a kind of a dilemma to us as, say, peace actors. We have cases of children who were abducted. Now, upon abduction, they were indoctrinated. They were forced to commit so many atrocities. And they grew up in rebel ranks, within the rebel groups, of course. Now, some of these have been arrested so far. One of them is facing charges in Uganda. One of them is facing, a number of them are facing charges at the International Criminal Court. Now, of course, we can look at them as perpetrators because they committed atrocities like killing, but then they are also victims at the same time. Why? Because they were abducted against their will. In fact, one of them was abducted at age 10 when he was going to school. So he's urging that, yes, it is the government of Uganda that failed to give me protection, and that is how I ended up being abducted. So it's like, how do you then treat this guy, as a perpetrator or as a victim? Then we have a number of cases of re-traumatization, what I called secondary traumatization. Those who were abducted and rescued back into their communities. We see their own parents saying, no, I can't accept this child back. Why? Because they feel a child was abducted, a killer came back. Because they look at these children as no longer their children, they are killers. And there are also instances where such children have, because of trauma, have ended up being like what you'd say, a burden to their parents. So there's also lack of comprehensive child reintegration, because when these children are rescued back, there's not enough time, there's not enough process, there's not enough preparation to prepare these people to fit back in communities. At one time, I was working with World Vision, and the best we could do was to put up reception centers, say, to receive these children, and after 2 or 1 week, we have to release them to their communities. But that is not enough. Then we have another challenge around identity, especially in terms of belonging. For a child who was born in captivity, who was born out of rape, comes back to community, he doesn't have a place he can call home. He doesn't know his parents, especially the father. He doesn't know his clan, such that he can be able to feel he's part of that society. In fact, in Africa, we associate our belonging to land. So this is a person who doesn't have a piece of land called home. And then there's also a number of unemployed and unemployable youth. They are unemployed because they were not able to, they don't have the right skills, especially to fit in the formal job market. But also they are unemployable because they lost out the whole generation at a time when they were supposed to be at school. So they are unemployable even if you gave them the opportunity. What are we doing about this? We have a number of interventions, and I'll talk about only 3 for today. One is what we call the Youth Peace Champions Project. This is a project that we are doing aimed at preventing radicalization. But also, we realize that we have youth and a number of other members who are already radicalized. So what we are doing is to prevent re-radicalization, to prevent such youth and people from sliding back into the kind of violence in which they were engaged. And we look at what we call a two-way approach, where we look at the body and the mind, looking at the root causes and also looking at the drivers of conflict. So we do a lot of training, skills training around the peace building to shift and transform their mindset. We do a lot of trauma healing and mentoring. We do a lot of sensitizations to such victims and also the caregivers. And we also do what we call referral pathways, because some of the challenges are so unique that we may not be able to handle them, especially those that need specialized treatment. So what we do referrals. And also we do a lot of experience sharing for this youth and others to learn from each other. And then another thing we do is to ensure that these people we have trained, we commission them as the peace champions. After getting the skills and transforming their minds, they now reach out to their peers, those who are in their categories, to be able to mentor them, to do a lot of community sensitizations, to do counseling, and what we also call community parliaments. These are community peer-to-peer sensitizations, because they understand themselves, they understand their friends much better, and they can be trusted and listened to. But then along the way, yes, we will train these victims or former perpetrators, if you want to call them that way, or youth who are trying to struggle and to survive. But after giving them skills, they have always reached out to us and said, yes, we appreciate the skills, we appreciate the peace, we appreciate all the tools you've given us, but we can't eat peace. Now, this one tells you that you need to go beyond just giving someone the skills and knowledge, but also look at the drivers of conflict, the root causes of that conflict, or, you know, what is bringing those conflicts or the push factors. Now, what we have done is to integrate what we call connectors for peace to be able to sustain that peace. And what we do, we train this youth and other community members in income generating activities. Now, we look at income generating activities, not only to bring income in the pockets of these groups, but also to use that as a connector as they come together, either to do goat rearing or carpentry or beekeeping and honey processing, whatever income generating activity they are doing. They are able to come together and learn from each other. They are able to come together and share experiences. They are able to come together on a daily basis. They are able to get engaged and also ensure that their minds are not thinking of violence again, but they it keeps their minds busy. And then another intervention is around peace education. This is premised mainly on the African saying that if you want to to make a tree straight, do it when it is still young. And also relates to the popular saying that prevention is better than cure. So we do a lot of community sensitizations. We started with the schools, but we also realized that one of the gaps was that there are also a number of children who are out of school. So at the moment, we are also doing a number of community sensitizations around that. Now, as I said, many of the victims, many of the vulnerable youth and children come from my district. And as a victim myself of violent conflict, as a Rotarian, as a former Rotary Peace Fellow, I felt I could do something. And what I'm doing right now is that I'm establishing what we call Namaingo Community Center. This is a multi-purpose skills training center that is aimed at skilling, empowering, and transforming the lives of vulnerable youth and women in communities in order to be able to prevent the radicalization we are seeing and the re-radicalization that we are seeing. And we have seen from the work we are doing, many of the former abducted children, many of the former child soldiers, and those who were calling themselves champions of violence are now testifying that they are now champions of peace. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much as well.
Yes. Thank you, Patrick. And now I get to the really interesting part, Patrick, where I get to talk and ask you about some of your personal stories. And if you are willing to share, which I think we talked beforehand, you are. And I would like to hear certainly about yourself and your connection to this. So could you give us a little bit of history? Your personal history.
Yeah, thank you so much. My history and background can take so many pages. But I'll just say, as I said, I'm a victim of violent conflict myself. I was born in a conflict setting at a time when we had a rebel group in eastern Uganda, where I come from, led by Alice Lakwena. This is a lady who was leading one of the rebel groups. So I grew up at a time when there's a lot of violence going on. There were a number of gunshots running around. We couldn't access school at that time because of the fear and the gunshots. Many times we would keep hiding in our rooms. Many of our parents could not go out to be able to fend for us. So many times we'd go hungry without food. So there's insecurity all over. Yeah, so this one gave me like self. When I grew up, it gave me passion and say, what is it that I can do to be able to ensure that we don't have the situation in which we went through. In fact, many of my OBs and OGs were not able to make it either in life because of the conflict or in terms of education. Of course, for me, I was lucky to be taken up by a friend and later taken up by Rotary International that gave me the skills that I apply now. Yeah, so many of my relatives also died in the incidences. Yeah, but growing up and also becoming now a peace actor, my work, fortunately or unfortunately, is in conflict settings because many times I feel I need to give up, but some on the other part of my heart says, but that is where your skills are needed. So I've worked in conflict zones. Of course, it causes trauma in itself. I've survived so many bullet shots, but because of the passion for peace, I keep going. Thank you.
Wow. Patrick, and for those who are joining us who are not familiar with the Peace Fellow program of Rotary, could you connect a little bit? Because you said, hey, I was basically adopted by Rotary International. And can you just share where you ended up and studying peace in order to then take it back to Uganda?
Well, I had the passion in me for peace building, but I didn't have the right skills, especially the theoretical skills, to be able to use in applying that. Of course, I had some experience. Yeah, but one of the opportunities I got is the Rotary International, the Rotary Peace Fellowship Program. I tried one time and I didn't go through. The next time I still tried because I really wanted to to ensure that I apply the skills and move on with my passion. I struggled around. It's a long story in Uganda. I couldn't go through until I applied and they took my application to the Rotary headquarters, and I was put under what they call at-large applications. Those are like whichever peace club may be able to take you on, because I was not able to get one around in Uganda at that time. I was lucky to be taken up by the Rotary Club of California that sponsored me, and I was able to join the Duke UNC Rotary Peace Program, Peace Center, where I got a lot of skills. I connected to Rotary. I got to know more about the wonderful work Rotary is doing, connected to so many Rotary fellows and the Rotarians. And also they were really good mentors, connected to a very beautiful and wonderful family. So it gave me that space that I felt I had, not even I felt, I like forgot all my negative past and where I was coming from. I was really able to really convince myself that my past cannot define my future. So I'm looking at a future with the passion of peace, where I can work with the others to be able to transform the lives of those who are most affected. And not, I don't wish someone to be where I was at one time. So this is a space that I've really benefited from so much. Yes. Thank you.
Wow, Patrick, I just hearing your story of perseverance, even just to apply to be a Peace Fellow and then to get that opportunity and to keep pursuing that dream. And even you said you've physically been shot. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, because I work in a conflict settings, where war zones and conflict settings, of course, to deliver the peace. But as you're delivering the peace, you're also one of the victims, the potential victims. So we've survived so many times we've survived the gunshots. But yeah, by God's grace, we are still alive.
Well, that was going to take me to my next question of other than getting support from Rotarians and then also your local community, where do you find that strength to persevere?
Well, the strength to persevere, one, it comes from within, the power within, because I've tried to build that power within, such that I can also have the power to, such I give that power to others, and also power with. Power with means it's me giving to others, but as a collective. For example, from my fellow peace fellows, I've learned a lot. They have inspired me. I've had a lot of good experiences. They have cheered me up. Even when I started Namaingo Community Center, I'm using my little savings from my little salaries to be able to put up buildings, to be able to put up programs and all that. Because at the moment, I'm not able to obtain real funding because I'm not established enough to have accounts that reflect that, yes, I have the, recently I was about to get a grant. We did so well, and our proposal was so good for this Namaingo Community Center. But at the end of the day, we're told, looking at our accounts, it was not convincing that we can handle the kind of money we're asking for, because we didn't have a lot of money on the account. Yeah. It's like what we always do, like when you're going you're seeking a visa to go to another country and say, show us your bank account to show us that you can sustain yourself while you're there. So when we use the amount of money you have on your accounts to measure peace, or like it becomes challenging.
Well, I appreciate that you share that, because so many times in Rotary, we are fundraising and applying for grants, but sometimes people aren't able to connect. Where is this money going? What difference is it making? And sometimes when we can kind of really dial into what is your true need, then maybe we can collectively, whether it's our club or our district, and then even our zone, trying to apply for more global grant funding to support what you are doing. So I appreciate that. Well, I'd like to soften it just a little bit. And could you share just a little bit about your family?
Yes, in terms of my family, I have a family in Kampala with the 4 children. I have my mother in my home village, that is Namaingo district. My father passed on. A number of our kind of distant parents also passed on, especially during the violence. In one of the stories written about me, which is the head with the is like heading of the story of a peace champion, it tells how my father had to go in conflict zones to bury his brother, and walked about 200 miles to go where the brother had been shot, and he's the only person who buried that the brother. So just to show that during conflict zones, we lost a number of family members, and so our family is not so big, so extended compared to other families across or around us. Yeah, but with my 4 children, I know we're also expanding, so I'm contributing to that. I'm looking forward to having grandchildren as well one day. Yeah, but we are pushing on. Yeah.
I love that. And how old are your children so people can understand?
Yeah, my children, I have one of 13, 9, 6, and 2.
And I think when we talk about young children, and I see your beaming joy when you think about your children, and the average age of people in Uganda, could you share that with our group today?
Well, yeah, when it comes to children, Uganda is regarded as one of the most youthful countries in the world. I think it has a very big base when it comes to the demographic chart. I think is in terms of youth, it's the second in the world. So we have around more than 75% being youth and children. So our future is in fact is we have that issue of youth. One, people look at it as one of the challenges that we have, because yes, we have a number of youth. We have the majority being youth in the country, but you also have those youth unemployed, and many of them unemployable, and many of them in conflict-prone areas or post-conflict communities. So unfortunately, sometimes many actors, including government, look at such as a burden to them, because being with unemployable many youth is kind of dangerous. So, but what we can always do is look at the dividends. What are the potential? How can we turn this youth as a resource instead of looking at them as a burden? So we need to be able to look at youth, the youth bulge, not as a burden, but at a resource. Like just that mindset shift, I think, will let us work with youth as the one actors in peace building and not as perpetrators. Look at them as the potential actors towards development, towards peace, and transforming the lives, their own lives and the lives of the communities.
Absolutely. And thank you. And the definition of youth in America is usually anyone under the age of 18, but it's very different in Africa of how you define youth. And as we kind of wrap up our great discussion with you before we transfer over to Marian to talk about serving women and of young ages as well, is there anything you would like to share about how you define youth in Uganda and your work in Central and Eastern Africa?
Well, in Uganda and Eastern and Central Africa, generally, youth are equally defined as anybody below 18 years, but that is in terms of, say, the constitution and the legal frameworks. But then the most important is, how does society look at youth? Society look at youth mainly as in terms of age sets. For example, you could be 50, but you're still a youth. Why? Because you have the community look at you as someone who has not transformed to a certain level. For example, if you're 50 and you're still staying in your mother's house or your parents' house, the rest of the community will look at you as a youth, because you have not taken up the responsibility of a man or a woman. There are also girls who are, say, 16. These are teenagers. These are children, but they are with, say, 2 children. Of course, these are child mothers with children, 2 or more. So community will look at such people as mature enough. Yeah, they may not be mature physically, but then because of the responsibilities they have taken on and all that, they are taken on as being adults. And that is one of the challenges we had in the post-conflict communities. For example, in northern Uganda, girls were abducted. They were gang raped by the rebels. They were affected by HIV. They came back. They are still children at 15 or 16, but they have children following them. So such in society would look at such as women, when actually they are children. Only that they also have children.
Yeah.
So they don't have a good place to fit in society. While they need support, society feels they are the one to give support, which they cannot afford.
Well, that sounds like certainly that would even be a good future discussion to talk about that challenge of when someone is either seen as an adult because of their situation or what they've had to manage, but perhaps mentally and emotionally, they have not had that time in order to mature to help others. Well, I want to ask this one question that came from one of our participants today. And it says, does the conflict stem from colonization that set borders, or the differences, oops, just a sec, or the differences to create an ongoing settlement to control them? Differences to create. Sonia, it would probably be better if you expressed this. Could you unmute and share your question so I'm understanding it correctly?
Yes, this is Sonia. Patrick, thank you so much for all that you're doing. For me, if you could just tell me where the unsettlement, was it colonization that started all this, or this unsettlement and war and everything ongoing for a long time?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sonia. It's a mix of many things. It's a mix of many factors. One, of course, the colonial legacy still is still manifest in the kind of conflict we have today because of the colonial legacy of divide and rule. I'll tell you that in my own community, I come from Eastern Uganda, which borders of Uganda, which borders Kenya. And during colonial demarcations, our community was divided into two. In fact, one of the families was divided into two. Recently, we had one of the politicians in Uganda who was once a minister, a Ugandan, but then we also had his brother was the vice president of Kenya, just to show you how one family was divided between Uganda and Kenya because of the colonial demarcations. Now, because of this legacy of divide and rule, we'll start looking at our fellow community members as Kenyans. Those are Kenyans. We are Ugandans. It is we against us. We create those artificial boundaries in our mindset. We start fighting each other over resources, over dominance, over authority, because it is now we versus them. And in many cases, there were communities who were used to fight other communities in favor of, say, colonialists and all that. So we have one colonial demarcations, but internally communities divided apart because of the colonial demarcations. And now what many of the manifestations we are seeing now is because of the fights along ethnic lines, because they kind of box us into clans, into regions, into sub-tribes. So we end up looking at from this community, I am born and fed with bad negative information that the other community members are my enemies. So we grow up perceiving that. But as I said, it's a complex kind of scenario with a number of emerging issues. Of course, others come and build on such. For example, when issues of climate change we are seeing now come, they kind of amplify the already existing tensions. They already amplify the existing conflicts. The governance issues come in and build on the negative kind of divisions that we already have. Issues to do with resource conflicts come up and we start fighting along our subdivisions. So many things that are kind of intertwined.
Patrick, I think this is probably a good segue, because I think some of what you're talking about now, we will actually address in our fourth quarter humanitarian briefing, where we kind of talk about elections and politics, divisiveness and unity, and how those impact. And that will be kind of apropos because in the United States, we will have had an election as well. But now I would love for you to introduce Marion, our next speaker. And she is going to share a little bit, because you are connected not only as Ugandans, but in your work. So could you please just help us meet Marion, and Marion will then share her story and I get to interview her. But I would like to understand, and our participants today, to understand your connection and how you know her.
Well, thank you very much. I know Marion as a friend, as a fellow Rotary Peace Fellow, although we went to different centers. I've known Marion as a very passionate peace builder in terms of conflict transformation, especially with in the area of youth, transforming youth and women. And so many stories. So in the interest of time, I'll end here and call upon Marion to come in and share her perspective.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so much.
Patrick. Thank you.
Good morning, good evening. How is everybody? I believe you're all doing well. You're fine. Greetings from Uganda, Kampala, the Pearl of Africa. My name is Marion Akiteng, and I come from Eastern Uganda, just like Patrick. I come from the eastern part of this country, a region called Teso, and my village is Ngora. The village is Kapir. The district is Ngora. I worked with Patrick on different projects. We've met in different spaces. He went to do his fellowship after myself. He was in the US, I was in Australia. So we kind of found ourselves crisscrossing same paths at different times with different age groups. So as much as we now work together, prior to that, we kind of all have worked with the same age groups. Only that his geographical coverage increased compared to mine. He went East and Central Africa, while I am still within Uganda, but we've all been to different parts of Uganda and working in the same parts of Uganda. So in relation to peace work, women, youth, because the question is going to be, what is it about women? What is it about women and peace? As much as Patrick has shared the perspective on children and youth, in there are women. In there are women. They are part of the crossfire because the women are the mothers of those children. So you can't talk about a child and leave out their mother. You can't talk about a child and leave out a youth, because that youth is either the mother is either a daughter or a son to this woman, or is responsible for the state in which this woman is in. So just like it is with the young people, while Patrick says we talk about giving skills, making them champions of peace. One thing also about the women is that the women have a unique attribute that is created unto them. They have the power to influence. When you look at most of the people who are successful, let's talk about the men who are successful. It's because they have the support. Their greatest cheerleader is usually the woman. So if the woman does not cheer you on, then you're likely to get into a fragmented space. So when wars happen, when conflicts happen, women get affected. They either are responsible for what is happening, or they actually know how to tie the loose knots on how to create the peace back into the society. We recently had a project funded in West Nile, northwestern Uganda, in a district called Yumbe. That region has had conflict for some time, but also in the history of all the conflicts in Uganda, it is one of the conflicts that finally had a peace agreement signed. That peace agreement was signed on the 24th of December, 2002. But our concern about that particular peace agreement was that it didn't have provisions for women. And when we spoke to the women on what their role was in the conflict in that area, one of those that were sharing said, much as the men were in the bush, they would talk to the women that, you see, these men Because you're going to ask yourself, if these men are in the bush, how do babies come through in society? Yet we think they're held up in the bush. So what happens is the men would sneak back home in the evenings, but then you see the thing is the woman is not supposed to talk about it. It's not supposed to reveal that the husband comes back home. So what the other women would do is to talk to the ones who are at home, talk to the women at home, that make sure by the time your husband comes home, sneaks home from the bush, make sure the children are clean, the house is clean, there's nice food. You know, they see that the home is habitable, it looks beautiful, it looks organized, and that would influence their decision to either stay in the bush or come back home. So when they come back and find healthy, good-looking children with nice food, they stop and say, but why am I in the bush? And yet I have a decent home with a beautiful family. And then they end up coming back home. So when narratives are presented like the women have no role in peace building or have no role in conflict resolution, I think it's an understatement, or it's a non-reported narrative. Women have a role. They are an interesting set of people. Yet when you go to another part of the country, you find that it is the mothers who bless the children to go and raid. So women are two-faced. So depending on the angle at which you're working with them, then you will get different sides of the story. But some of the things we also do is to give them connectors for peace, because they have that potential. And it at the same time in the African culture, at some point in time, you'd find that the boy child would be preferred to go to school compared to the girl child. And yet you will hear elders make statements in passing, but you know it's from their heart of hearts. And they say, when a girl child goes wherever she's going, even if she's going into prostitution, she'll always remember, I have my parents, and she'll come back home to support them, even if they're getting their resources from prostitution. So you'll find that to have peace in a home, to have peace in the community, a lot could happen if the women also had the skills. In this particular project that we worked on, we empowered the women. And then the men said, now you're empowering these women, and they're going back to husbands who are not empowered. What do you think is going to happen? The next time you're doing empowerment, I think it is important that you empower couples, husband and wife, bring them together, so that there is an there's equality, an equal balance in information and knowledge sharing. Wow. So even when we're doing the inception meeting, a young lady asked, so are you going to empower us economically so that we are able to stand up for our families? That was a straight up question, though it was not minced. And fortunately or thankfully, we had it planned. And then we said, okay, fine, it's time for you to take on economic empowerment. So we first gave them the soft skill, that is the knowledge, and then they got out into hardware. So even with peace work, you've got to do both software and hardware skills. You can't keep giving soft skills. Takes us back to the question Patrick asked. Yes, we don't eat peace. We don't eat peace, but how can we have the peace? So at the end of the day, what happens is that after giving them the skills, then we ask them identify those economic activities that you think you can do. It again ceased to be from the top to the bottom. It became from the bottom to the top, because they know their environments, they know their communities better, they know what works best. It was not about me, who doesn't even come from their community, but they themselves. So Mary, working with women, yes.
Excuse the interruption. I am just so excited, and we might have to schedule another one in the future, but I know we're coming close to time. And what you're saying, and why it was so important to all of us for the Global Partners in Peace to make sure we highlighted your work, your connection with Patrick, your devotion to capacity building in women, to make sure that people know that it is not just the strength of men, that it is also the strength of women, and whether it is seen in the care of the home, the care for the children and developing families, but also developing the skills to sustain their own lives and business skills. So I love that you have kind of brought everything together and eventually in with bringing couples. So it's not a one spouse against the other or all of men against women or vice versa, but how do we in unity give these skills? And I think the voices of women and girls has been not yet brought to the forefront. So I am so grateful you are bringing this up, but I know we also need to reground and also close it out. Is there anything, any last things you wanted to share about your work with women?
Women have the potential
That's right.
to create peace in society.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think we need to know that we no longer need to discount, right? Someone, and we can make space for everyone at the table. And as we wrap things up, I want to kind of realize that you all have brought Ugandan, Central, Eastern African issues that are not only issues where you are, they are issues that actually touch us all around the world, but you are doing it as champions of peace. And Marian and Patrick, I thank you for sharing your work, your passion as peace fellows. And it doesn't matter if you grow up in the same village with someone, it doesn't matter if you go to the same university with someone, but it's our collective shared desire for more peace in the world that comes down to peace in our homes, in our villages, in our districts, and as that will hopefully spill out to others. Because we have these time limits, we are limited on questions, but we thank you all for joining us. We thank you for all of this. Our next quarterly briefing will be in December, and we're going to be talking about elections. And some of our members are also from South America. And so we will be bringing in North and South American conversations, but we will always have space for anyone around the world to chime in. So we are so grateful for you all. And Alan, do you have any last minute contributions or thoughts before I thank and close us out?
Thank you, Hillary. I really don't. I want to reiterate what you just said, though, is that these briefings do open the space for all of us to learn so much. And I want to thank your club for all that you do and the work you do. But I also want to take a minute and thank Marian and Patrick for being with us today and sharing all that you've shared. We could go on for a lot longer. I know. I'm sorry we're running out of time. We'd love to hear more. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do that at a later date. But thank you all for coming. I appreciate that you're taking the time to be here, and look forward to seeing you all at the next briefing. It'll be very interesting as we all go through our election process over the next couple months.
That's right. And Patrick and Marian, whether you write in the comments or say it here, what is your greatest need in your peace work? Because sometimes, unless we ask people, they don't know how, we all don't know how to support you unless you say, here's our greatest need in working towards peace in Uganda. What would you answer or type in the chat, your choice?
Yeah, and I would add to that, if anyone on this call is interested in learning more about the club, please get a hold of Hillary or Sophia. Maybe you could put your email address in the chat as well, both of you. And then, let Patrick or Marian speak, or put any information in the chat they'd like.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For me,
Yeah.
Okay, Patrick, you can go.
Marion. Go ahead, Marion.
Okay. Personally, what I would need to be able to continue in the peace work is would need resources to reach out to more numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Equally, like Marion, I think it's about resources in terms of funding. Personally, as I said, I'm establishing the community center, which is just starting with buildings, with the infrastructure and all that. So I'm reaching out to, I know I've reached out to some friends who have contributed some a little money to support me in this process, but something I'm very passionate about as my great give back to community. And as a Rotarian, as a Rotary Peace Fellow, I feel I really need to give back to community. I look at the rest of the community, the rest of the OBs and OGs I were with, and I say, how can I be able to help to apply the skills? And this is my journey. I want to move with others. Thank you.
Wonderful. And if everyone at this time would love to pop on camera, allow yourself to say goodbye or thank you to Marion, Patrick. Huge thank you to Alan as well. We appreciate you all so much, and you're always welcome to join us. We meet the first and third Saturday of every month, and we are here on Zoom. We start at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, just like we did today. And I just am so grateful for you all, and thank you for your patience, your attention, and your passion for peace.